I now recognize Ranking Member Welch.
Thank you very much. You know, the concrete issues of a universal injunction or forum shopping are things that we can address. But there is a context that we're all operating in, and this is where I disagree with my colleagues, particularly Senator Cruz and his recitation of what he saw as a judicial rampage. This moment we're in our country, is testing whether the separation of powers, three co-equal branches of government, shall endure. That's really the question. We've seen an abdication of constitutional responsibility by the Congress. It's appalling. Ceding to a president the ability to impound funds, something that was declared unconstitutional in the Nixon Doctrine. Ceding to the president tariff authority, which in the Constitution belongs to the policymakers in Congress. Just two examples of Congress ceding its constitutional authority. That's done willingly by my colleagues in the House and some in the Senate. We should reassert our authority. But the second leg of that, the transfer of authority to the executive, is the rampant attack on the judiciary. And Senator Cruz gave some examples of what he thought was judicial overreach. Each one of those examples, as I see it, was the judges doing their job. They disagreed. And when they disagreed, it was asserted by the president and by the attorney general that they were monsters, they were renegades, they were out of control. It was an ad hominem attack because the judges were doing their jobs. And I will say we can deal with the forum shopping, which is something the private bar gets involved in. We can deal with universal injunctions. But the all-out assault on judges, because they make decisions, which is the job it is they have to do. And the decision is, has a president exceeded his authority? The decision is, has the Congress passed a law that deviates from constitutional requirements? Those are so profoundly important to keep that separation of powers and to keep the competition between the three branches so that we don't have absolute power vested in a single person, and that's the chief executive. So when, Senator Cruz, you talk about a judge making this decision about keeping somebody here, it's called due process. I'm for due process. When we talk about judges striking down under the international trade agreement, whether the president has authority to set these tariffs, and it's a three-judge decision, one appointed by Trump, one appointed by Obama, one appointed by Reagan, and they say the president didn't have authority, I would say that is the judges doing their jobs. But what is most profoundly important for the well-being of our country is that the Congress reassert its authority to pass laws, to restrict the executive or to empower the executive, but not to cede our authority to the executive ever. And it's our responsibility to do every single thing we can to validate the legitimate exercise of the decision-making authority of the judiciary. I look forward to this hearing and the testimony of the witnesses. Thank you.
Thank you. I would make two brief observations. Number one, it is interesting as our Democrat colleagues defend these nationwide injunctions that neither of them made any reference to the fact that the number of nationwide injunctions issued in the first 4 months is greater than the entire 20th century and is greater than all of the nationwide injunctions issued against Bush, Obama, and Biden combined, nor did they address the disturbing fact that of the 40 universal injunctions that have been issued in the last 4 months, 35 of them came from the same 5 judicial districts. There is a reason for this. Blue state attorneys general and radical leftist groups are seeking out affirmatively radical judges who they know will impose their own policy preferences. If it were simply, as our Democrat colleagues said, judges following the law, then you wouldn't have to keep going to the same radical judges over and over and over again because judges across the board should do that. But the litigants know exactly who the zealots are that are on the bench, and that's who they are seeking out. I will also point out that the discussion about the urgency of protecting the safety of judges. Listen, I agree. We should protect the safety of every federal judge, but it is interesting because my Democrat colleagues were utterly silent during 4 years of the Biden administration when you had violent mobs outside the homes of Supreme Court justices unhappy with the Supreme Court's ruling in Dobbs, and the Biden Justice Department refused to enforce federal law and protect the justices. And my Democrat colleagues were perfectly happy with Supreme Court justices being threatened if they disliked the rulings that were coming from the Supreme Court justices. Unlike my colleagues, I believe we should protect judges regardless of whether I agree with them or not. We should protect their safety. And every time you hear a Democrat senator talk about protecting judges from acts of violence, you ought to ask them, why did they not have a word to say about the Biden Justice Department allowing mobs to threaten the families and children of Supreme Court justices night after night after night while Biden's Attorney General refused to follow the law? And with that, I'll recognize the ranking member of the full committee, Senator Durbin.
Thank you, Senator Cruz.